Welcome, everybody. This is a fantastic show of Coffee and Pan Dulce. The title of today's show, if you are unaware, is White Women, Queens of Racism. Well, we're sure to have a lively discussion on that. And we also have a blast from our past. Jenny-Jaymes Gunn is joining us. Fantastic. Longtime viewers of the show will recognize her from many seasons past. We also have Barb Bacon, Saint Bernie, Christian Cano, and of course, the very handsome Stephen DiFiore. We'll probably be joined later in the show, hopefully, fingers crossed, by Lucille Puckett and Mama Ruth. And with that, I give it over to Christian Cano, our lovely host.
Thank you, Stephen. It's so great to have you back. We missed you for the last 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
The warm weather brought you out.
It does. It has a wonderful magical effect that way.
Well, welcome everyone to Coffee and Pandusa. I'm Christian Cano, one of your co-hosts. We want to welcome you. Today is February 24th. We have just 4 more days. There's 28 days in February. Only 4 more days till February, and then we go into March, and then spring is here. It's going by so fast. Well, I want to thank everyone who's joining us on Facebook Live, and also those who join us later on YouTube and also watch us on Facebook as well. As Stephen shared with you, today is a topic that we have been wanting to talk about, at least I have been wanting to talk about, for over 2 years, almost 2.5 years. The title is White Women, Queens of Racism, ? Are they the queens of racism? And we'll explain kind of, the topic and the reason we want to, or at least we want to talk about it. But before we do that, as we always do on Coffee and Pandusa, and does anyone have the Brady Bunch screen up, or do I have to look down here and see?
One I'm looking at. Me, you, Jenny, Stephen.
Okay, so let's go that way so I can share us. Introduce yourself and your imaginary button.
Okay, I'm Barb Bacon. I'm a healthcare advocate here in South Charlotte, taking one more neighbor to get her second dose this morning. So, yay, rah. I have 2 buttons currently, Black Lives Matter, and I want gun control. So take it away, Jenny.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jenny-Jaymes again. I am a longtime host and welcome back guest. I guess he wanted me to talk on this subject. But anyway, I am a coordinator with Charlotte Pride, with Trans Pride and the Real Out Film Festival, and many other LGBT things, too many to name. And I'm also on the board of directors for the National Organization of Women Charlotte. And I'll turn it over to Christian.
Oh no, Stephen's next.
I'll take it.
Stephen.
Though.
Okay.
Yeah.
No offense, it's all right. I'm a very forgettable guy. My name is Stephen DiFiore. I'm the recording secretary for the Libertarian Party of Mecklenburg County. As a libertarian, my always button is taxation is theft, but an issue that I truly have a lot of strong feelings on is ending the drug war. And we have some good news coming out of New Jersey, if you can believe good news coming out of New Jersey, with a bill that ends one very significant aspect of the drug war, in my opinion, an immoral and evil government policy that disproportionately affects minorities and the poor. So it's a good thing to see that this prohibition is starting to go away so that we can stop criminalizing people for nonviolent offenses. And that's it. Back to you, Christian.
Well, thank you, Stephen. And once again, I'm Christian Cano, one of your other co-hosts. My imaginary buttons is Medicare for All, Moms Demand Action, gun sense legislation. We'll be having a show in March talking about the gun violence epidemic in America, and then Trust Women as well. There it is over this way. And of course, Black Lives Matter is a very important topic that we have been talking about probably for the last year now. And so we do want to join on our show Lucille Puckett. She was with us a couple weeks ago. She's a community advocate and a community activist as well. And Lucia, we're going around the Brady Bunch screen. Introduce yourself in 30 seconds. And if you have any imaginary buttons, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lucille. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Good morning, everyone. Yes. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lucille Puckett. As he said, I'm a community activist, not really just a community activist, just someone out in the community that desires to see change and a voice for the community. My organization is Take Back Our Hoods, which is helping our own damn selves. I am also right now the political action chair for the NAACP. We have elections coming up this weekend, and I'm in the running for second vice chair. So just helping wherever I can, doing whatever I can, part of Stop Killing Our Children. There's a list of organizations I can go on, and within 30 seconds, I won't have time.
Well, thank you, Lucille. It's great to have you back and to hear your perspective. As Stephen shared with you, we should be joined by Mama Ruth briefly in and out. And then I think Joel may be joining us again, you know, not exactly sure today. But today's topic, white women, queens of racism. And I want to give kind of just a tiny bitty backstory, and then I want to go to everyone to kind of see what their feeling is. So for the last several years, especially since I moved to Charlotte, those of us, I think probably everyone here, we've lived in different cities around the country. And Charlotte, when you move here, it doesn't take long if you've lived in other cities to realize this, we called it the bless your heart kind of racism, where it's not in your face, it's just kind of a subtle, it's hard to explain. And for a while, it was very difficult for me to kind of explain it. I just saw it. And it wasn't until I ran in 2016 that I really started to see it within my own party. I'm a Democrat. And then when I ran again in 2018, especially when I was running against the favorite individual, I really saw it. Because there were a lot of supporters of the person I was running against that was calling me a racist because I was highlighting how our party usually just supports white men, but whenever people of color start to run, they just kind of say good luck, but they don't really wholeheartedly support them. And that's been something that I've noticed since then, and I've really tried to educate myself and sit back to find out how, you know, all kinds of things. So I've spoken with everyone on this show, and if you've watched the shows over the last couple of years, you've realized I've talked about it. I've also talked about moderate women, how Democrats in this state tend to run towards to try to capture a few moderate women and why they are so important. It seems like that's like the suburban women. I guess that's kind of what they call it in politics. And then we had Trump, so it kind of, you know, a lot of things have been happening. And then January 6th, the insurrection happened. And then we had these two Congress people that have come on board, Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia. And then we also have the person from Denver who are QAnon kind of followers. And so I started to think about it, and it was something that I had been seeing for a while. And then this great article came out in January, January 24th or 26th, like one of those days, from a online news outlet called Vox, V-O-X. And the title of the article was White Women's Role in White Supremacy Explained. And it was written by a white woman. And I read it and it was like, oh my God, this is exactly what I've been thinking, and, you know, and so forth. And so I said, now's the time to have this conversation because, and I want to hear what everyone has to say. It seems to me that when we think of racism and bigotry, we have this vision of KKK men or, you know, the Proud Boys and so forth. And we tend to not always think of the women in this movement or so forth. And this article goes back in history and talks about women. You know, they didn't have any rights in the 1800s, but the one right they did have is they could own slaves. That was their only power. And then after the Civil War, when they could no longer own slaves, their power transferred to other ways. They started to talk about school segregation or school choice. These are terms that they had been using lately. And, you know, so there's a lot of things to go about. I won't get into the article, but I want to go around and I guess I'm just going to ask one simple question and then we'll kind of go a little bit deeper in this. Do you believe that I don't even know how to code this. This is when I'm glad Jenny is back because she's good. Um, do you see this also here, or have you seen it, or what are your thoughts? And we'll start, Jenny, since we've missed you for a while, and then Lucille, I'm very interested to hear your perspective, because I know you've been in Charlotte for a long time. And is this something that, I don't know. So let's start, Jenny. Tell me what you think in 30 seconds.
Oh boy, you gave me the loaded question. Thanks very much. Welcome back. I think and you see it play out in elections here in North Carolina. So I'm going to stick to North Carolina with my answer. I've noticed that there's a tremendous amount of support for candidates of color on the local level. So like Mayor Vi, that sort of thing. I think where that divide begins is when you start seeing state level offices and federal offices. Governor Cooper, District 9, which we've seen, since I've lived here. I moved here and I've voted 3 times in District 9 because of all the craziness that's going on down there. But we see this divide, this racist divide happen in my own party. I'm also a Democrat, so for full disclosure. And all of a sudden, white support, especially white women, fades off really fast when let's say in a primary, for example, I used the last senatorial primary with Cal Cunningham, and I'm going to specifically use Erica Smith, even though there was 3 people running. Those were the 2 front runners. They were the top vote getters. And we saw a tremendous lack of support for Erica Smith. And even though on the statewide polls and all the newspapers, they showed her scoring better against Tillis. But the lack of support from the party and from the party insiders dropped off dramatically. And in different town halls I went to, that sort of thing. So I think it's this when we're talking about just politics in general, I think we see this Bedouization of the Democratic Party, where if the white male has the right check boxes, military service, this, that, they're automatically qualified. They're not even questioned. And whereas if I see, especially a woman of color running for office, I see this lackluster support. I see this lack of enthusiasm. We saw this between I almost called him Dan McGrady, Dan McCready and Cynthia Wallace. Yes. And we saw a massive, not just in money too. I mean, they dumped tens of millions of dollars into McCready's 2 campaigns. And we heard crickets for Cynthia.
Yep.
And that wasn't the only drop off, but the push to support her, even though I personally believe she was a better candidate. Yeah. And I'm only speaking for myself for a lot of reasons. And I also think too that if we'd have invested in the kind of money, even half the money that we put into McCready, if we'd have put into Cynthia Wallace's campaign, she might have been our District 9 representative.
Yeah, right.
But when it's in this case, whether you want to call it a built-in bias or a bigotry, or just the way we've always done things and nobody wants to stand up and correct it, whatever you want to call it, it's there. It's obvious. As somebody that is an outsider that's only lived here since September of 2018, I see it. And I came from a racist state. I came from Texas, so I mean, but I think it's worse here.
So, who else wants to jump in?
I will.
Okay, Barb.
I agree with Jenny completely, and I saw it when I was out campaigning for Tira, and Cynthia and her mom were there. They'd come over to me and talk to me, but they weren't talking to them. And I was astonished, because not only is her mother just cute, but she really worked hard, and she got very little commentaries from people, very few questions, or just totally ignored. And that really surprised me.
Yeah. How about you, Stephen? And then Lucille, you're on mute.
Okay, well, I just wanted to piggyback off of Jenny. I totally agree with her, but
being a candidate, I really have seen, the racism, the sexism, and all that kind of stuff. And you talk about Vi, when you talk about not fitting the aesthetics, that would be me. But when you look at Vi, she kind of still fit that, the description a little bit. She's, very fair skinned, her hair. So, that can still play a part in, the white woman's mind. She looks more like me. She's relatable to me versus Lucille, who is dark skinned, hair from hell, Africa or whatever, and don't wear it in a certain kind of way and don't talk in a certain kind of way. Even though she will make a better candidate because she's out here and she knows the issues, we can't really vote for her or gravitate to her because, again, she don't fit those aesthetics. So I have seen that a lot in politics, but also outside of politics, where, the white woman feels like, hell, she's entitled to, she only gives to the Black community. And I know 30 seconds and I'm gonna end it up right here. And she's only give to the Black community out of sympathy, more so out of, deserving, I should say.
That's a good point. And I want to touch on that in a second, but Stephen, jump in for a second. You're a libertarian. I know you're going to say, we don't have this problem in my party.
Well,
are you?
Yeah, well, so here's the thing, like I don't see it that often. So I can't speak to how the Democrats, like how they're trying to handle the situation or what goes on behind closed doors, because I'm not a Democrat. Same thing with the Republicans. I'm not a Republican. I don't know what goes on. But with the Libertarian Party, it just is not something we see all that often. Now, here's the thing. Our party is predominantly people of Caucasian persuasion, right?
Yep.
But that's more happenstance than design. And every now and then, someone who is, let's say, maybe alt-right adjacent or whatever, will hear something about libertarianism. They're like, "Oh, I like that," and they'll come in and be part of our group because it's an idea that appeals to a broad swath of people. But when they begin to express those, let's say, bigoted points of view, typically they get kind of a cold reception, and they either come to realize that racism is just lazy thinking and collectivism, which is something that the people who are attracted to our party typically reject, or they don't come to realize that and they leave and they go somewhere else. Usually they go back to the Republicans. So it's I can't speak a whole lot on it. I mean, I'm not a white woman, so I can't speak to that. I'm not a Democrat, so I can't speak to that. I'm not a racist, so I can't really speak to things I don't necessarily experience or see all that much. But I will say this, that racism in and of itself, in my opinion, from my point of view, is just very lazy thinking. It's a way to turn off your brain, or you don't have to think critically about someone or some group. You mentioned a Vox article earlier. There's another article, it's an essay online. It's called I Can Tolerate Anything Except the Outgroup. It's by a blog called Slate Star Codex. It's one of the best essays I've ever read about this kind of lazy thinking. And anyone who has an intellectually curious mind and wants to read an essay, it is fan-friggin-tastic. I'll post a link in the show notes, in the comments. But it talks about how if someone is outside your group, you will treat them far more harshly than somebody who is like within, for no other good reason than, oh, they're similar to me. And that's a kind of thinking. It's something we have to look like. Maybe it's ingrained in us as humans, but we can unlearn that and then act better over time. And that's all I'll say on that for now.
You made a very good point. I'm going to touch on that, but we want to welcome Mama Ruth, one of our other co-hosts. She is with us today. Mama Ruth, you want to add anything before I ask this question?
No, I'm being delighted. I'm happy to see Jenny in the show.
Yes.
I'm glad Steve is back with his normal, I hope, normal schedule. Hi, Lucille and Barb. So I'm glad to be here. I haven't been feeling good. I've been in the hospital. I had a narcotic reaction. I had never taken any that high narcotic. And but I'm home. I'm glad I'm safe. No COVID, no nothing like that. It's my arm. But I'm good. I'm good.
Excellent. Well, listen, Jenny and I spoke briefly Monday night, kind of chatted, and she said something that I have been feeling, but when she said it, it was like, oh, someone else, you get these moments where you think, am I the only one that feels this? And Jenny, I may be paraphrasing, so correct me if I'm saying this wrong. When we we expect this from Republicans because they don't hide it. They will, they're not all of them. We got to say that.
Yeah, we know a lot of really good Republicans, right?
Yeah, we know a lot of really good Republicans, but the party in general tends to be very blatant about suppressing, trying to suppress people of color's vote, and they're not shy about it. They only have 15 more years of. They feel like white supremacy groups tend to lean towards them. So when you walk into a Republican meeting, and I don't feel threatened because I know if you see one, you're like, well, I expect it when I walk in here. When I walk into a libertarian group, I feel very warm and very welcomed. It's the Democratic groups that when I walk into that I feel this certain individuals, there's this look, Democratic women organizations, the ND9, the ND9 group has a lot of them. I used to joke about the ND9 group only formed because they wanted to be like the white version of the Democratic Party because they don't have to abide by the Democratic Party. They're kind of, but they formed their own like little club, so to speak. And the people who join Indivisible, they're really Democratic groups, but they don't want to be under the guidance of people of color and Democrats. And so I feel that in those groups. And I don't know. And so that's why, to me, it has always been, I expect it from the Republicans when I walk in. When I go to libertarian events, I feel very welcome, and I don't feel that. It's the Democratic ones. And I know I'm pounding on the Democrats, and the reason is because it is the reason that we continue to have systemic racism and bigotry is because the Democratic moderate women, I don't know. I mean, does anybody, I don't know where I'm going with this, but Jenny, did I kind of characterize that?
Here, I'll bail you out because you're getting deeper and deeper. But first of all, as somebody visibly different, I'm a genderqueer person. I'll reiterate what Christian said about our conversation. When I walk into a group that's outside of my normal circles, like no matter what it is, because I'm not going to just pick on the Republicans, but I always expect the pushback. I expect the weird side eyes. I expect the little passive aggressive comments. Maybe they misgender me and call me sir or he, him or something like that. I expect that. It's just part of the deal. When I get the pushback inside my own groups, whether it's, and not just the Democratic Party, but auxiliary groups, what I'd call support groups, things that are supposed to be progressive or liberal. And I get the weird microaggressions. And that's what I really call it, is it's these little subtle microaggressions, these little bless your heart isms that my parents, to also riff on what Lucille said, is that our appearances make them uncomfortable. Somebody that's visibly queer, or somebody that has darker skin, more natural hair, those sort of things make people uncomfortable because they're in these little narrow silos and they go, well, we like Vi because she's one of us. Well, what do you mean by that? Do you mean she's more Anglo appearing? What is it about that you really love about Vi, but you don't love about Lucille? And it really comes down to these preconceived notions that if a strong Black woman speaks her mind and speaks it in a very clear manner that doesn't tiptoe around stuff like Vi does, Vi ducks and covers a lot. She disappears a lot in big emergencies, and she wants to not ruffle any feathers. That's why we ended up with the Republican National Convention. And that's just, not very good. And it's the same way with me. If I speak my mind, if I say something really direct, which is most of the time, I ruffle feathers. I make people uncomfortable because the next time I see them, I can tell whatever I said pissed them off a little bit, and that's okay. I'd rather people get the shock value. But I think that passive aggressiveness that you see from what I call left-leaning groups, no matter what they are, they are the ones that they've got a lot of internalized bigotry, and they don't know how to process it. So they do these microaggressions. They have these passive aggressive little walls that they put up and go, we like Jenny, but we don't want her to have a leadership role, or we don't want her to have this. And I experienced it in my own community, the LGBT community as well. And so, where they'll accept me to a certain level, but then it kind of stops right there. They'll block further growth in the community. I see it all the time.
So Jenny said something that's interesting, but and I was going to piggyback on that again. But Luce, I don't know, does anybody else want to add anything to what I said, or you've noticed? Lucille, I don't know if your hand is up, or if you're okay. Well, she said something very interesting, because I hear it a lot, and I don't even think we realize that we say it. I am guilty of this as well, and maybe it's one of the reasons this has been important to me over the last 2.5 years, is because maybe I'm trying to right the wrong in my own life, because I may have done it unconsciously, or I know Jenny and I argue there's no such thing as unconsciously, she says this, but I tend to say misogynistic things. And I have tried to learn from that. When someone says, Christian, I got into big trouble in 2017 when I used the P word. And my excuse was I grew up with just guys, that's not an excuse, and so Jenny in the past has always told me, Christian, you're saying this. And so when someone tells me that, it doesn't hurt, maybe it does hurt my feelings a little bit, because I go, oh, no, I'm not. If there's this denial, and then you say, okay, well, maybe thank you for telling me that. I want to correct myself. But it seems like in Charlotte, I don't notice it a lot anywhere else, but especially in North Carolina and Charlotte, when you're in a group of white women, which is why I've gotten myself in so much trouble at the precinct level, at the county level, and the state level, when I tell them, this is what I'm seeing, how you're treating the Black candidate, because I said this in my own precinct meeting. And when a white candidate comes in, you're all paying attention. But when a Black candidate comes into the precinct meeting, you say, you only have 2 minutes to talk. And I'm like, well, you didn't say that to the white, to the white candidate. It's like, it's just a different way that they
Now we
treat.
lost Christian.
Oh, did you lose me? No, I'm here.
Can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Steve, you want to take over?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can. I'm sorry, Barbara. So I guess what I'm trying to go with that is that they get really offended when you let them know, this is how I'm seeing you treating someone. And their natural instinct response is to attack you and to call you a racist, and that seems to be the MO of how here, if you correct a white woman here, it's like, how dare you correct me? There's this, and that's how we came up with the bless your heart kind of racism, because maybe they've just never been corrected. That's not something that's been done a lot here. Yeah. And so when you do correct them, it's like, well, how dare you correct me? And then they start.
But I'm gonna interject here. But do you think sometimes, and maybe I should ask Barb this, when we have specific social circles, and a lot of times when we stay just in those circles so long, we get to the point where everybody gives us a free pass. So when somebody different comes into the circles, no matter what it is, whatever that difference is, whether it's ideology, race, sexuality, gender, whatever, I think it challenges people's norms. I mean, I think it pushes their envelope, so to speak. I mean, even hanging out with libertarians, it pushed my norms, and that sort of thing. I had to make sure Steve was still awake.
I mean, hopefully we push norms in a good way.
But yeah, but sometimes the reactions when people get pushed back, and I'm not excusing the behavior, because I think Stephen said it best, there's a higher order of thinking and there's a lower order of thinking, and racism is just a vast sign of ignorance. But I think because like I don't know how many trans people Stephen's hung out with in his life, but I've never had an issue with him, and yeah, I never felt a weird pushback or a discomfort when we've seen each other in person and or
well, I'm glad,
because
because you're a cool person. I wouldn't want to make you feel uncomfortable. Jeez, what kind of horrible person would I be?
Yeah, well, exactly. But I also say that I'm dramatically different than most people, probably in the libertarian circles, and
not as different as you may think.
Yeah, I mean, there might be a few, trans people in there, but in general terms, I think very few people know trans people, and I can always see when I'm around somebody that's uncomfortable with who I am. I can feel it, and it'll show up in their language. Yeah. And so,
hey, Jenny, I want to ask you this question, because you have all, and maybe anyone else has noticed this. I noticed, especially, I've always known this in my life, in my professional career, I've always had really strong women allies professionally. My best bosses have been women, many of them white. They have encouraged me. As an LGBTQ person, for some reason, there was this bond that we created because they went through some suffering, and it's challenging for everyone, but there seems to be this bond. But it seems like as long as an LGBT person, because for many years I was white until I moved here, I felt always white. As long as you agree with them, they will support you and bond with you. The moment you no longer agree, and it's really here in Charlotte, it seems like the moment you no longer agree with the white woman here, not all white women, but the white women that I have been encountered in politics, for an example, you're not, as you mentioned, you're not one of the good ones. You're one of the troublemakers. You're one of those individuals. And so that's why I've noticed, like, if it's a white gay issue, they all support it. Marriage equality was something that all the white moderate women just loved. But when it's immigration, when it's Black Lives Matter.
Uh-oh, we lost him again.
Oh, he'll come back. But I'll speak on something really briefly. One of the things.
Something to say after you.
Oh, okay. You know what? You go first.
I'll give you as quick as I can. I agree with Jenny again, because I grew up in a tiny little town in Illinois, completely, and the term we use is lily white. And I was there until I was in my mid-30s, and then the company I worked for got bought by DuPont, and I had to move to Wilmington, Delaware. They were in the midst of race riots there. I had never seen anything like that in my life. I never thought I was prejudiced, but I was scared in several situations, but I was very protected. And the more I got used to it, working within the corporation and meeting and working with Black people, I didn't have any problem with them, and they were helping me. They felt sorry for me because I was such a kid, but sheltered more than anything. Just, I'd go back home and I'd try to put comments out there and talk about pushback from my own family, and especially some of my aunts that just, they were there their entire life. I said, do you even know anyone that's Black? You don't. And until you do, and until you work with them and get to know them, your attitude is just plain wrong. Let's go up 30 years. My niece got pregnant by her boyfriend. He's Black. We've known Ed for 20 years and they had a baby because she wanted to have a baby. My brother, her dad was a terrible racist. I mean, some of the jokes he told, I sit there and I would just grimace or I'd get up and leave. He is a totally different person now because he has a grandson and now he has a granddaughter. And to see the dynamics in our whole family change because of that, things are changing. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but I took a lot of flack from everybody from my liberal comments now, or I actually had one of my relatives say, "You've gone to the dark side." And I said, "Excuse me?" So I try to keep my mouth shut when I'm there now, but I just can't. But I'm glad to have a little bit of a mix in our family now. And you can tell the parts of our family that don't approve because she doesn't get invited to things, and it's terrible, but it's really common. And I see it here as well. But having gone through that personally, I get it. So that's all.
So just imagine.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to
Go
say
ahead.
Lucille had her hand up.
Mhm.
So just imagine how those children are going to feel being split and divided like that.
I know.
Because if you can feel it, trust and believe they're going to be able to sense that division and non-acceptance too.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's just what we deal with. And I hear you saying that, about how you grew up in the Lily White. There is a lot of that. I mean, I want to know what can be done, because it's all about education.
Yeah.
It's all about an encounter with a Black person, an African-American person, to see that, I mean, all except the color of our skin and the wealth that, people grew up with, the silver spoon in their mouth, the gold spoon, or
Right.
whatever color spoon that we didn't have. We all, if you cut me, you cut you, we're gonna bleed red.
Yeah.
And we have had some similar experience outside of, like I said, race, and outside of the financial. So it's going to take that conversation, and it ain't going to be one conversation. And it's going to take a conversation where both sides can be free to address their feelings, their inner hurt, their personal experiences. I was talking to a lady yesterday, and she was telling me how, she had maids. Her mother never went to a grocery store in a day in her life. She had nannies where, she never had to clean up behind herself, just all of those things. And then she don't understand why the African-American communities, when we talk about politics or getting involved, don't really get involved when it's supposedly our issues. But when we have to worry about how we're going to pay our light bill, a roof over our head, how we're going to clothe our children, when we miss work, that's money out of the paycheck that we can't afford to. But when, on the other hand, when you're the white woman, where you have a nanny or, a maid or a husband, or you've been left a wealth of money, you don't have those issues to worry about. So of course you could be more so-called engaged.
Yeah. Yeah.
Both of your comments reminded me of something. Go ahead, Christian.
I can't see him.
No, I just want to say, in case you didn't notice, the power went out in our neighborhood. So luckily, because we've done this show so many times, I have all this my backup lights. So please, thank you for continuing the show. Go ahead, Stephen.
Oh, yeah. So to piggyback on something that both Barb and Lucille have said, this speaks to something I've seen in my own life. So I grew up in the North Country of New York State, in the Adirondacks. It's a very small area. The hometown I grew up in, 500 people. And it is very, ethnic, English and French. I was the weirdo with the last name of DiFiore. Where are you guys from? With family down from that far away, foreign sounding place called Long Island, right? So, but one of the issues that I saw where I grew up, everyone was pretty much the same ethnicity, but we had a lot of class division. And there's a lot of issues of poverty and wealth and a lot of the knock-on effects that you see from that, right? There's a big difference between the folks who live in like the suburban-ish areas or the city-ish areas or the trailer parks and things like that. When I moved down here, right, and for growing up, it was always a class thing, right? Because there was no race divide to, you know, cloud anyone's judgment, right? It was always class, class, class. I moved down here and I saw the same class things, but I noticed something different. I noticed two things. For the first thing I noticed was people would talk about class issues in terms of race issues. And then I started to notice, oh yeah, the race and class seem to be very highly correlated in the South. When I lived in Carteret County, and then when I moved to Mecklenburg County and Charlotte. And a lot of that has to do with the history of, you know, government policies forcing some groups into poverty castes, and the knock-on effects of that, because you just don't get rid of that overnight. But I think it's very interesting that some of the issues that we have, it's class, right? So, you know, someone growing up with the silver spoon in their mouth, that's a class issue. And one of the interesting things is when we talk about class as a bunch of working class people, right? That's a place of unity where we can all kind of like, oh yeah, there's a thing. But you know, as soon as we start confusing class and race together, the waters can get muddy in a way, and we can kind of lose sight of like a proper path. But I find that to be an interesting thing where, from my perspective, it's always been class issues. I know that sounds weird for the libertarian to say, but the conversation always seems to revolve around race issues. And I think that sometimes that lack of clarity can confuse people or confuse topics or make the solutions to certain things a little less obvious. But then again, that's just my perspective, and I could be completely wrong.
Stephen, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
Is it possible? That's a very good point, because is it possible, Christian, that I'm confusing the attitudes of some of the people that I've seen in some of the meetings? I'm confusing that with I mean, is it possible that I mean, I don't know, Jenny, you think maybe I could be confusing what I'm seeing, how some people are treated more as a class thing than a race thing? I mean,
because I would say
to hear your
to again to piggyback off of something that Lucille said that I think is very prescient and very very observant, is like, say, the pass that Vi gets, you know, the mayor of Charlotte, right? That to me, from my perspective, seems to be more of a class deference versus the fact that she's a little lighter in the skin tone.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, granted, I'm not the best person to to discuss these sorts of things, because for whatever reason, I happen not to notice certain things unless they're pointed out to me. But it seems like class would be more of the thing to talk about.
Well, but also too, let's flip this around, and we can also talk about this in the Latinx community too.
That's what I was gonna say. Thank you, Jenny, for bringing it up.
There's a real divide between darker skinned Latinx people, especially Afro Latinx people, and somebody that's very fair skinned like Ruth and Christian that are really not really much darker than me. And there's I think our society applies class to race.
Yeah.
So there's an implicit bias. Let's do it the other way. And you can go back in history when people that lived across the river from each other looked different. And you go, well, you just don't go over there because it's dangerous. And I'm talking about like 10,000 years ago. And now let's flash forward to modern times. Do we assign class to people that look visibly different, a lot different? How much of that is socioeconomic, and how much of that is built-in racism that we haven't addressed? And is it an amalgamation of all of that? Like, do we fear people that look different than us So therefore, we automatically put up our internalized racist shields to protect ourselves out of fear. How much of it is we should have grown past this already, and how much of it is that people that are darker skinned get less opportunities, therefore it keeps them in a caste system. And you know, whether it's vying for jobs, because I think Vi has, I'm not even sure what she does for a living, because I know she doesn't now. She's retired now, so
she's always been a civil servant. She worked
she's always had government jobs.
I wasn't sure what she did, but I think she has had a pretty powerful career from what I understand. And so, is there a built-in bias in our system, our economic system, that if you fit the bill, you get promoted up? And I use this with my own life. Before I transitioned and I lived as a male, I can tell you, I could go on 20 job interviews, I would get 20 job offers. I never had a job in my career, except for when I was self-employed, but I never had a job where I worked for a corporation where I didn't get promoted in the first 6 months. Now, post-transition, living as Jenny, I went on 19 job interviews in Amarillo, Texas. I got 1 job offer. Same person, different luck.
Yeah.
That's, you know, Jenny, when you told me that story.
It's heartbreaking. And people judge you by how you look or who you love.
Yes.
In certain situations.
So Stephen, the reason what you said was an excellent point, but this is what I've noticed during my life, my professional life. And I'm not joking when I say this. I was always thought, well, I thought you were Italian. I didn't know you were Latino. You know, so I was considered white to people who interviewed me, who hired me. You know, I don't speak Spanish. When I moved to Charlotte, when I was still playing that role, I was one of the good ones. I was one of the, you know, I turned Latino because they would tell me that, but I was one of the good ones. It wasn't until I started questioning things that I became. So when a white person here questions things, they're called progressive, they're whatever. But when a person of color, they're treated very, very completely differently. And so as a person who has actually seen, in 2016, the white women loved me because I was very moderate. I didn't question how, you know, this is. In 2017, when I started to question them, it was suddenly, Latino, you're a racist and this. And so I'm the same person, but because when you start questioning them, it's like, it's suddenly very different. Val is considered, her hair has gotten blonder since she became a mayor, if you've noticed that.
Yeah.
Yes, the pearl started to come out, the way she dresses. But I guarantee you, if Viola Lyles ever stood up and said, Black Lives Matter, we don't want racists in this city, she would no longer be one of the good ones. She would be one of the troublemakers. Yeah. And,
if she would have said no
I equate that today.
If she would have said no to the Republican convention coming here, it would have been a totally different, you know, look or whatever for her. You know, when she run with the Trumps, sitting on their cabin, one of us as African Americans went to Washington, D.C. and sat on one of Donald Trump's cabinets. I mean, we would have been shunned from here to DC, from here to cross country, but it was Vi. And I say that because, you know, I have been told that I don't fit the aesthetics. You know, I would never be voted as mayor because I don't have that mayor's look. I have been told by someone who is, you know, dad is white, mom is black, you know, and she is fair-skinned, look white. Hair looks white. She was like, I got 3 felonies and never been to prison. But that would never have happened to me as a Black woman. 1 felony, maybe 3 misdemeanors would have added up to prison time. So it do make a difference. And I think when we talk about class and racism, those 2 terms do interact.
Yeah.
Because when you are wealthy and well-to-do, you know, your parents telling you, you know, don't associate with those people or stay away from those people. And perfect example, I have a god granddaughter who mom is white, but her dad is black. Grandmother cannot stand me as a black woman. And I do great with her own grandchildren, more so than she do, and her grandchildren are mixed. And she don't want her daughter to associate with black people, but her daughter was raped by a white man. So she got 3 children, and all of them of mixed race. So, you know, class and wealth kind of do go hand in hand, but at the end of the day, I think with both issues, we need to educate. We need to be able to have those open conversations, and I think that that's where change would occur. And until we are able to have these open conversations, and you can tell when you step on or say something to a Caucasian woman where she turns real flush in the face because she don't know how to accept that conversation as not being hurtful or criticism. It's just a conversation that, you know, we need to have. And I don't know if I really made that clear, but class and racism kind of go hand in hand. I mean, if you didn't live on that side of the track, then you wouldn't know what, you know, black is.
Yeah.
And Lucille, you made a very good point. And so now I want to kind of talk about solutions, because how do we address this? How do we get, you know, how do we get to that point in Charlotte? Because I know one of the things that we've all learned, or at least I've learned in Charlotte and Mecklenburg, is they talk about things a lot, but nothing ever gets fixed.
Right.
Racism and affordable housing and everything has been talked about since the 50s and 60s. Churches have groups about racism and how to, you know, segregation and everything. But no one ever wants to actually fix it. They just talk about it. Even our own mayor, when there's an issue, let's start a committee. Let's talk about it. You know, we had this immigration committee 2 years ago. Nothing's ever been done about that, you know? And I find it interesting that Larkin, the city council person who was put in charge of that, was so proud of being in charge of that, and nothing has ever happened. So if he decides to run at large, people need to ask him, what happened? You know, what happened to it?
What happened?
So how do you think, I mean, and the reason, like I keep saying this, and that's why I wanted to hear everyone else's point of view, because for 2.5 years, I kept thinking, am I the only one that sees this here? Because in many other cities that I've lived in, the people that have taken charge of trying to fix this have been progressive white women. They're the ones that have been calling people together saying, we need to address this. We need to fix this. Here, they're not calling people. They're sitting on the side saying, okay. And it's like the people of color have been put in charge of fixing racism and bigotry. I mean, we're not the racists and the bigots. We're the ones.
I have white women that would come to me, you know, to talk about this conversation, you know, that we need to have. Just like right now in my organization, Take Back Our Hoods, I had a white couple to come to our march last Saturday, and they put on a Take Back Our Hoods hoodie, my hoodie, and one of the white women say she wore it the next day, and some white woman say, you are racist. You shouldn't have that on. You don't know why you even wearing that hoodie. I mean, you know, and the white woman said, okay, now I need another one because, you know, hey, I'm gonna wear it every day, you know, because we need to have these conversations in our community. And she want us to come into the white community and have these marches in reference to the violence that's going on in the Black community. But, you know, we need to engage the white community too, because this is just.
Yeah, I agree.
And I was
Engagement
telling
and
her in our marches, we see. Go ahead.
Oh no, I thought you were done, so I didn't want to interrupt you. Oh, I was going to say conversation.
Look, I take those long pauses sometimes to catch my breath.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah. No, but yeah, engagement and conversation, like that's the solution. Like it really is. Talking about Barb, you know, children have an amazing way of changing people. They really do. And, you know, she said that there are some members of her family that aren't, you know, like just more hands off, but others change, because when you have someone in your life that is, from a different, perspective or a different part of the community, you have that interaction. It's really hard to dislike or hate up close, right? When you know somebody and you're like right there with them, like it's really hard to have ill will towards somebody. I'll say like Christian and I, for example, pretty different politically, right? And a lot of people would be like, oh, I can't like people who I disagree with politically for whatever reason. But when you get to know somebody, it's like, yeah, like we can go to this, well, COVID's done, we can go to the sports bar and like, watch, the Panthers lose and have a good time, and we just won't talk about gun control, right? Like it's very easy. We can just talk about how much the Panthers are not that great, right? So when you're having these conversations, when you're engaged, when you talk to people as people, yeah, like that's a real solution. I love the idea of having the take back our hoods thing, like in other communities. Like that's cool, because that's a way to like get in it, have conversations, change hearts and minds. Yeah, no, I like it. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt though. I'm gonna stop.
No, that's so, let's go
No,
back
it's
to
funny.
Good.
It's funny because in my family, me being Latina, we always suspect as Latinas getting married to Latinos. In my family, we have a little bit of everything. My older niece is married to Quad, which is an African American guy that we love him to the death. I mean, he is a great guy. She's been married almost 10 years, 9 years with him. And my second nephew's married to Rebecca. Rebecca, it's white, but it's a completely white, total different white of the white people that I've ever met, So I get to experience myself within my family, the two difference, because, growing up in Texas is totally different. Like I mentioned to y'all last week, you grew up in a place where you don't know there's other countries or there's other nationalities. Everyone, there's no racism. I mean, where I grew up, to me, everybody was the same. There were brothers and neighbors, and that was it. Coming to this state, it was totally challenging for me, for my kids. When you turn around and you're only 22 years old and you get a gunpoint, by an African-American teenage, you get traumatized. And then you start having all this bad experience that you need to kind of change your mentality and let your heart guide you. Because, if I go by my vision or what I see or what I hear by others, I will probably fall into that category of racism. But when you kind of open up your heart and understand that there is a cover up, I would say, or a jacket put over, or a sticker put over by society, not only by whites, not only of Blacks, but also by Latinos that are in this country, we create that racism. We are the ones that are creating that difference and that bridge between each other. Jenny mentioned earlier, there is when I dye my hair in blonde, and I've been blonde before, I have better feedbacks and I get better connections and I get better observations than being dark-haired. So there is a big difference. People need to start changing their visuality into their mentality. They got to stop seeing people physically and start seeing people internally. So they got to give the opportunity, like Steve said. If we go to a game and we watch a game, we're not going to talk about no gun reforms. Of course. Why? Because we have came up to a point where we have to agree to disagree on some of the points. We have to learn how I have to accept Lucille just the way she is. And hey, you know what? You might not agree with her thoughts, but I respect her. I might not agree with her, or she might not agree with me, but I respect her. But you know what? If you're gonna go up and pose yourself as a mayor or become a candidate, I'm gonna do my best cheer you up and to do what I can do. Because I know there's many of the neighborhoods that need her help, that maybe our current mayor is not giving it. And we need that type of change. So we just have to change our mentality, I think. I mean, it's not about color, it's not about social, it's not about class. It's about how we grew up, and we allow people to draw the pictures in our head.
And you're exactly right. Just like this past weekend, we was in a community that was mostly Hispanic, and we out there cheering, stop killing our children, say no, put the guns down. We see the Hispanics that some may understand English, but there's a language barrier for others, but they out there giving us power, and I just want them to be able to come in and march and walk and have a conversation and talk to the people, because I mean, their people are getting killed just like ours, so we need to band together. And as far as the Blacks and the Hispanic, I mean, we're the same, and I just feel like the Caucasians and other people do not want us to come together, because it's still that divide and conquer mentality, because they know if both of our groups of our race of people, nationality come together, we will be more powerful and more dominant than the Caucasian race alone. And they don't want that. They want to keep us divided so they can feel like.
Personally, I've experienced racism between both. I've been rejected by Black African American women. I've been, and I've been rejected also. Well, not never rejected by white Anglos, but I felt. Kristen and I went to a meeting in Monroe, and you can feel, that bad vibe where everybody's just staring. They don't need to tell you something, but they show you the way they don't.
You can feel it. That's right.
But I mean, you can feel. So it's like I say again, it's not about colors. It's about the education that people has put in us. I have 5 boys, and my kids love hanging out, and they don't see color or anything. But if I would be a bad person, I would kind of tell them, hey, we live in this side of town. You have to learn how to choose wisely, and do not hang out with Blacks, or do not hang out with, you know what I'm saying? We as humans, as parents, as adults, we are teaching our future kids how to tear that up. If we don't teach them how to tear it down, then we're going to continue the cycle, and it's going to get worse.
Exactly. And that's why education is important, because when you look at commercials, or you look at children who go to schools of, a mixed population of schools, them kids play together. They don't look at, oh, you this color or you that color. It's until their parents see, oh, you're not supposed to play with them, or don't associate with them. That's where we're teaching our children that racism and that sort of stuff, because children, they're colorblind, they're race blind, they don't see their sex is blind. They don't see that. That is taught. That is a taught behavior. Absolutely. And I have to go, and I have really enjoyed this, but I have another Zoom call that I'm 6 minutes late for.
Yes. Well, that's why I was trying to let everyone know. I want to thank everyone for staying over. We went over just a little bit, and we kind of need to wrap this up here. But before I do that, there's something I've forgotten. Jenny's been gone so long that she forgot to remind me. Everyone, we need to remember to salute to our neighbors, Coffee and Pan Dulce.
Sorry, I came late.
Oh, that's fine.
My cup twice.
Yeah, I forgot to do that. Sorry, Barbara. And of course, we want to thank Manolo's Bakery, our Pan Dulce sponsor on Central Avenue. Please support your Black and brown businesses in Charlotte during this global pandemic, or basically any small business. So we've gone over, and Mama Ruth and everyone said something very important. And that was really kind of the reason I wanted to talk about this from women, because this is something that's taught to people. Now, granted, once nurture and nature, when they get a certain age, you have the ability to kind of change how you were taught, so to speak. But if in Charlotte and Mecklenburg, there are women who fall into this category that we've been talking about, who do not acknowledge the fact that certain people do that here, their children are going to be taught that, and it's just going to continue and continue. So for those of us who've moved here, many of us maybe see it, but they may not even notice that. And I know Jenny hates when I say that, because that's just part of what they do here, you know? And so when they talk about school choice, when I see the women in the Women's March who are fighting for so forth, but you never see them in any other marches. You don't see them in marching for immigrants. You don't see them marching for Black Lives Matter. They're only very specific. And so, I mean, that's one of the reasons we need to talk about this, is because of the fact that, you know, it's going to be taught. And so, and Mama Ruth mentioned something that I thought was very interesting, and Jenny may get this as well. One of the reasons, there's a lot of great things about every state, but one of the unique things about Texas is, regardless of who you are, if you buy into this Texas idea, this Texas brand, you're accepted by everyone else because you all have one commonality: you're Texan. You know, you, as long as you say you buy into that brand, I'm a Texan. So, you know, and so you're kind of accepted.
Could never be a Texan then, because their barbecue isn't as good as Carolina barbecue.
And wear boots and sombreros.
Yes. And so it's similar to sports fans. If you're a Manchester United fan or Panthers fan, Panthers fans accept you. They overlook certain things that maybe they would normally be biased or have prejudice towards, as long as you're part of that group. There's not a lot of,
and if you're a Man U fan, we tell you to go back across the pond where you belong, you dirty, dirty red coat limey.
I only mention that because it's a big soccer team. I can't think of any other soccer team, you know. But
Real Madrid.
So for example, yeah. So Stephen, you know, you're from New York. Yeah, I don't know if you know there's some.
Don't hold that against me.
And so here, there's not that. There's not a lot of, you know, the Panthers, you know, they're not like a team. We follow them, but you know, it's not like, oh, you're a Panthers fan.
Still better than the Jets.
It's probably more basketball here. I mean, college basketball. I mean, considering the storied history of all three big basketball programs here, they've all had phenomenal success. But I was going to interject, hey Ruth, when y'all went to that meeting in Monroe, it's not that they rejected you; it's a rejected Christian, but it was guilt by association, is what it was. When you hang out with him, you better wear a flak jacket.
No, Jenny, I went also to different. No, Jenny,
I couldn't pass it up.
I went also to different meetings while he was out of town representing him.
Yeah,
and you can feel the difference in some groups. Even here, I mean, you know, y'all know I live in Union County. I step into some of the stuff, some of the meetings, and it's different. It's very different.
When you're visibly different than the norm of the room, you know, because most political meetings I go to, especially outside of my community, I'm usually the only trans woman that I know of in the room most of the time, and you can feel the vibe. I mean, I can feel the eyeballs, you know, and I mean, I do dress flamboyantly, but even when I dress down a lot more back in Texas, it never helped me blend. I'm not going to ever blend. I mean, I'm a 6 foot tall woman built like a Dallas Cowboy linebacker, and so I realize that I'm going to be noticed, and it is what it is. You know, I know this won't change overnight. It's one of the reasons I try to link up with diverse communities to educate them on what trans is and what trans isn't, and relating it back to race or class or whatever you want to call it. I think bridging those divides and educating people, especially our children, on that is a must. And I think most of all, visibility and bridging those gaps and reaching out to different communities and going to those communities. I don't think it's all their job. I don't think it's the Latinx or the Black community's job to reach out to us. I think we have to go there, and I think we have to immerse ourselves in the needs of those specific communities.
But I think the only
Conversation and
person,
engagement is key.
but
Yeah.
the only person that can actually cause a change of like that to their own community will be another white person understanding, opening their eyes, and going towards them. It doesn't
That's what,
make a difference between us as Latino or Black or anybody go and try to. That's like trying to introduce them a sugar candy and see if they'll accept it. So no, we have to take our own person. Like I have to talk to my own community.
yeah.
You know, because we have an issue as well. We have issues not with white people. We have issues with Black American people, you know, because everything that they've gone through. So we have to teach them and make them understand that, you know, they're human beings and they could they can do whatever as any other person of color can do. The only thing is the way we start seeing them, that's going to change their reaction.
Respect begets respect.
Yes, I do agree. And here's the good news. Even though what I have seen and witnessed over the last 2.5 years, or specifically 2.5 years, but you know, we've been here, what, 8 years? I don't know how long. There are so many really good people here in Charlotte and North Carolina that that are working towards addressing those. You know, when we hear Dr. B attending how to be an anti-racist, you know, that's something that I don't think I would have seen 3 years ago. Yeah. When I see there's some really good progressive women in my own party that have reached out to me when we said we were going to do this show and said, thank you for having that conversation. You know, thank you for being able to have this conversation. And so there are a lot of people who see this, and I do believe that they, in their heart, they would like to see this addressed and changed. It may not be as easy for them because it would be like, you know, when you're in that bubble, they probably feel like they're going to be kicked out of that bubble if they address it. But I do think that our millennials and the younger individuals and people who have moved here don't have that need to be part. Like, I don't have that need to be part of the Precinct 69 or the Indy 9 clique. I don't have that need. And so I'm not afraid for them to, or the Democratic women, I'm not afraid for them to say things about me because they're not, that doesn't impact me. But there are people who are running for office who they're so afraid of the Democratic women or certain individuals or Indy 9 or some of the other kind of white women kind of groups. And as a result of that, they're afraid to say anything. And so I do hope that there are people within those groups that are going to watch this show. I know they are. And then maybe who will watch this later, who understand that these are conversations that we need to have, because until we have these conversations as a Democrat, we're going to continue to lose elections because people of color see that in our party.
Did you just say that if you don't have those conversations, Democrats are going to lose? Guys, don't have the conversations. Stop having the conversations. No conversations at all. Stop talking. I'm playing.
All right. Yeah, I shouldn't be giving all these secrets out or whatever, but you know, these are conversations.
Especially when you have a libertarian with you.
That's right. That's right.
I was going to make a joke at the Libertarian Party's expense, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, that's kind of that's punching down.
Yeah,
punch it down when you make jokes.
I'll pick on a party that's our own size.
Yeah. Don't pick on the party that doesn't have institutional power. Pick on the one that does.
Correct. So I'll continue to pick on Republicans.
That's
there we go. That'll help y'all. But what I was gonna say is I think that just the progress that I've seen in the few years that I've been in Charlotte, I think it's going to come from people like us that are activists or advocates or in those circles. I think the Democratic candidates probably shouldn't address it as much because they need to just concentrate on running and winning offices. I think us organizers, I think the people that are the feet on the street, I think we got to have these internal conversations and say, that's not going to fly. The next time that Cynthia runs for office, we need to do a better job. And those conversations need to happen now in circles, in those internal circles. Like Christian and I off camera talked about. I'm part of a Facebook group that's called Progressive Women. And I've had those conversations in there, and I've gotten mixed reactions. I've gotten some pushback, with probably some people with guilty minds. And I've had some people that said, no, Jenny, you really have a valid point. And, because it was over the Jeff Jackson announcement. He was running for Senate. And Erica Smith announced a week or two earlier, and there was no big poster hurrah or something like that. And you got one woman of color
visible.
and a white man. And the white man's reaction was, now, granted, some people didn't know who Erica was or is, and she lives in a different part of the state. So some of them said, well, thanks for educating us on this. We didn't really know who Erica Smith was. I said, I don't know how you couldn't, because we had a primary with her, recently. But but one of the I guess the key point was, I noticed a disparity of excitement with Jeff, and I didn't see it with Erica until somebody like me stirred the pot, because I stirred the pot on his announcement in that group. And then all of a sudden people some of them took shots at me, some of them they were excited, some of them got educated. But I think it's those kind of conversations that we have to continue to have. And Christian and I talked about this about 2 or 3 weeks ago when I was battling them for about 2 or 3 days. And it really speaks to people's hearts when you throw things out there like that and say, why aren't y'all congratulating Erica? And then, oh man, I had to put a raincoat on after that, because we're throwing mud at me, And,
no, I agree. And Jenny, and that was Jenny, what you were saying, and we got to end because our power has gone out in this neighborhood, and I'm running on batteries, and I've got things going on. But what you're saying is so correct. And the reason that, as a Democrat, now I know not everyone's a Democrat who watches this show. If you're a Republican, you're probably watching this show going, oh, that's wonderful. If you're a Libertarian, you're going, come over to our party. If you're unaffiliated, you're probably saying, that's why I left the party, but it's important. The reason we continue to lose elections is because the base, which is browner and younger, they see this and they don't want to come out and vote for Democrats. So when they see all the excitement come over Jeff Jackson, Cal Cunningham, or whoever, and they see no excitement for Erica Smith or Cynthia Wallace or anyone else who's running of color, they say, well, why do I want to, I'm going to focus on another race. And so, and that's one of the reason it has to be changed within our own party, is because until we acknowledge we've never had a person of color as our state chairperson, that's got to change, even for symbolic reasons. If we continue to have these white guys and a couple of white women, people of color are going to say, this party doesn't look like me. And they're not going to be encouraged to go out and vote. And they're going to go unaffiliated or whatever the case is. So that this is an important issue as a Democrat, but it's also just an important issue as for a lot of things that happen in Charlotte. So thank you, Jenny, for saying that. And we've run out of time because my thing is going on. Let's go around the Brady Bunch screen. Tell us where you're going to be. And then if you're on Zoom, stay on. I have just a little bit enough juice to do our promo. So I think it's Steve, Jenny, Stephen, Mama Ruth, and then we'll end the show.
Okay, I'm going to be pretty much home. I am taking care of a friend starting tomorrow, and helping her recover from a outpatient surgery for 3 days. So that's primarily my social thing through Saturday night.
Okay.
And I'm just going to be working, living the high life as a working stiff. But if you are a disaffected Democrat and you are not happy with the way your party's doing things, and you do not agree, and you believe that it is wrong to initiate force and violence to enact political and social goals, then you know what? Maybe you should check out the Libertarians. We could use your help.
Okay. And Mama Ruth, I'm about to run out of batteries. Mama Ruth.
I'll be home. That's it.
Thank you. Listen, Tony Forman is just joining us. Tony, I'm so sorry we're ending the show. I know you would have added a lot to this conversation. My battery's about to run out. So thank you so much for joining us on Coffee Pandusi. We went over. I hope the conversation that we had is something that you will start talking about as well for our community and so forth. And we have a lot more to talk about on this Don't forget
Bye
next
to
week.
everybody that was joining, all the comments, we appreciate it. Sorry, we can't read them anymore because of the battery.
Yes. So, all right. Thank you everyone for joining us at Coffee and Ponduce. Stay on if you're on Zoom. Thank you.